The time has come. Meech on. February 13th. Get your tickets right now. It's going down. We know Florida gonna be there. Miami gonna be there. The legend himself gonna be in the building, making history. Meech, who else coming?
The whole nation. Detroit, St. Louis, California, everybody. Atlanta, Georgia, ATL, stand up.
Woo. We gonna make history. Get your tickets right now. Y'all better be there February 13th. Meech on.
This wasn't a quiet announcement. This wasn't a harmless press release. This was a move that sent shockwaves through hip-hop history and made people ask one dangerous question out loud. Did 50 Cent just turn his back on Big Meech? Because while fans were still trying to process the fallout, the side-eyes, and the tension bubbling behind the scenes, 50 Cent and Southwest T stepped forward and said it anyway. The BMF documentary is coming. And it's coming whether everyone is comfortable with it or not. No warning. No smoothing things over. Just straight business. And the moment that news hit, timelines froze like somebody pulled the plug on the Wi-Fi. This made the Kardashians look organized. This made industry beefs look scripted. Because when a story this personal gets repackaged into content while relationships are cracking, people start whispering words like betrayal. Fans immediately asked the same thing. Why now? Why like this? And why does it feel like somebody just got cut out of their own legacy? Because once you understand what's really happening behind this documentary drop, it stops looking like a media project and starts looking like a power play. This didn't feel like an announcement. It felt like a statement. The kind that lands heavy, sits awkward, and forces everyone to ask the same uncomfortable question at the same time. When 50 Cent revealed that a BMF documentary was officially moving forward, the timing alone made people pause. Because this wasn't happening in a vacuum. This was happening while the fallout was still warm, the alliance is still shaky, and the silence louder than any diss record. To understand why this shook fans the way it did, you have to understand what BMF actually represents. This isn't just a crime story. This isn't just television IP. BMF is mythology in hip-hop culture. It's legend layered on legend, built on loyalty, family, power, and the idea that certain bonds are unbreakable no matter how big the money gets. That's why the documentary announcement didn't feel neutral. It felt personal. For years, the assumption was simple. Big Meech's story would be told with Big Meech at the center of the table, not watching from the sidelines. Even as BMF turned into a massive TV franchise, fans believed the narrative was still anchored in respect. That belief cracked the moment. The documentary news dropped without any visible sign of unity. The timing was ruthless. The Rick Ross tension was still fresh in people's minds. The public disagreement hadn't cooled. The sides hadn't settled. And yet here comes a documentary announcement that looks polished, confident, and very much moving forward. No pause. No public reconciliation. Just momentum. That's where the word betrayal started creeping into conversations. Not because fans had proof, but because the optics felt cold. In hip-hop, optics matter almost as much as reality. When something looks like a power shift, people treat it like one. And this looked like control changing hands in real time. 50 Cent has never pretended to play nice when it comes to ownership. His entire career is built on understanding leverage before anyone else realizes there's a game being played. From music to television, he doesn't wait for consensus. He moves, and everyone else reacts. That history made this announcement feel less like coincidence and more like strategy. Fans immediately started asking the same question. Who controls the narrative now? Because documentaries don't just tell stories, they lock them. They decide which version of events becomes official memory and which details get softened, reframed, or ignored entirely. Whoever controls the edit controls the legacy. That's why this hit harder than a tweet or a caption ever could. A documentary is permanent. It's not a response. It's not a reaction. It's a declaration of authority over the story. And announcing one while tensions are unresolved sends a very specific message. Whether intentional or not. Southwest T's involvement complicated everything. As Big Meech's brother, his presence blurred the lines between business and blood. Some fans saw it as reassurance that the family was still represented. Others saw it as confirmation that internal fractures were deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Because when family members align differently in public, it rarely means everything is fine behind the scenes. The internet split immediately. One side said this was pure business, that stories don't wait for feelings and history doesn't pause for personal disputes. They argued that if the documentary didn't move forward now, someone else would tell the story instead. In their eyes, this wasn't betrayal. It was protection of legacy before it slipped away. The other side wasn't convinced. They argued that legacy without alignment feels hollow, that pushing forward while relationships are strained looks less like preservation and more like repositioning. And in a culture built on loyalty, repositioning is often read as abandonment. Old interviews resurfaced within minutes. Clips where loyalty was emphasized, where brotherhood was described as sacred, where trust was framed as non-negotiable. Fans lined those words up against the present moment and asked whether the energy still matched. And once past promises collide with present actions, trust erodes quickly. What made the announcement feel even sharper was how unapologetic it appeared. There was no public attempt to soften the moment, no reassurance that everyone was aligned, no language about unity or healing. It felt like a decision that had already been made. With or without public approval, 50 Cent's reputation only intensified. That perception? He's known for cutting through emotion when strategy calls for it. When he believes something is the right move, he doesn't wait for permission. Fans know this. That's why the announcement didn't feel accidental. It felt intentional. The Rick Ross fallout added another layer of suspicion. People started asking whether this documentary was a response, a counter move, or a way to solidify narrative control while tensions played out elsewhere. In hip-hop, timing is rarely random, silence is rarely neutral, and moves like this are rarely isolated. The conversation quickly shifted from excitement to concern. What would the documentary emphasize? What would it leave out? Whose voice would carry the most weight? And who might be quietly edited into the background? Once those questions enter the discussion, trust starts leaking fast. Fans weren't worried about lies. They were worried about imbalance, about one side shaping the story while another had limited say. That fear alone was enough to flip anticipation into skepticism overnight. This stopped being about entertainment almost immediately. It became about ownership. Ownership of history, ownership of narrative, ownership of legacy. And those are things people don't give up easily, especially when the story is their life. By the time the initial shock settled, one thing was clear. This documentary wasn't just content. It was a pivot. A shift in power over how the BMF story would be remembered moving forward. Once the announcement finished, echoing across timelines, the conversation didn't slow down. It multiplied. What started as confusion hardened into suspicion, and then morphed into something louder, speculation dressed up as certainty. People weren't just reacting anymore. They were choosing sides like this was a championship bout and loyalty was the prize. Memes hit first, because that's how the internet processes discomfort. One viral post compared the situation to someone throwing a surprise party at their own intervention. Another joked that the BMF documentary was dropping like a season finale nobody agreed on. Even the humor carried a sharp edge, because everyone knew this wasn't just content news. It felt like a fracture going public. Rick Ross' name got pulled into the chaos immediately. Whether he commented or not didn't matter. His presence hovered over the entire situation like a ghost nobody could ignore. Fans began revisiting old statements, lyrics, interviews, and business moves, stitching together theories that felt less like gossip and more like a narrative war. In hip-hop, feuds don't need daily updates to stay alive. They simmer. The timing made people uneasy. The fallout hadn't cooled, yet here was a polished announcement pushing forward. To some, it looked like confidence. To others, it looked like indifference. And in a culture where respect is currency, indifference often reads as disrespect. Influencers and hip-hop commentators jumped in fast. Thumbnails screamed words like betrayal, power move, and this changes everything. Podcasts debated whether this was a strategic masterstroke or a cold dismissal of loyalty. And once the talking heads start arguing, the audience assumes something serious is unfolding. 50 Cent's silence only added fuel. Fans dissected every non-reaction, every unrelated post, every moment he chose not to address the controversy directly. Silence in moments like this doesn't feel neutral. It feels intentional. And intentional silence gets interpreted as confidence, dismissal, or quiet dominance depending on who's watching. Southwest T's role became a pressure point. His involvement confused people more than it comforted them. Some saw it as proof that the family still had a voice. Others interpreted it as confirmation that internal lines had already been drawn. When family members appear aligned differently in public projects, fans assume private conversations have already gone left. TikTok turned into a courtroom again. Creators broke down the announcement frame by frame, pairing it with dramatic music and captions that asked loaded questions. Who approved this? Who benefits? Who loses control? Everyone suddenly had an opinion on media ownership and narrative power, whether they understood the business or not. What really escalated the outrage was the growing sense that this documentary wasn't just about telling a story. It was about locking it. Documentaries don't just document, they finalize. They freeze events into a version that becomes reference material forever. And fans worried that once this version dropped, there would be no room left for correction. The comparisons went wild. People likened it to historical documentaries that later got criticized for bias. Others compared it to biopics where the subject had little control over their own portrayal. One viral comment said this felt like watching someone else write the ending to a book that wasn't finished yet. That line stuck. Public opinion fractured cleanly. One side said this was inevitable. That story is this big, don't wait for harmony. That waiting for everyone to agree would mean the story never gets told. They framed 50 Cent as the businessman, doing what businessmen do, securing narrative control before it slips away. The other side saw it as premature and aggressive. They argued that moving forward amid tension feels like erasure, not efficiency. That history told without consensus becomes propaganda. And in hip-hop culture, propaganda disguised as legacy gets rejected fast. Rick Ross supporters didn't stay quiet either. They accused 50 Cent of weaponizing timing, of using media rollout as leverage. Whether those accusations were fair didn't matter. They circulated. And once accusations circulate widely enough, they become part of the story whether proven or not. The memes turn darker. Less jokes, more commentary wrapped in humor. Screenshots of the announcement paired with captions about rewriting history. Clips from old interviews resurfaced, contrasting past unity with present silence. People weren't laughing as much anymore. They were archiving. Industry insiders chimed in vaguely. Posts about owning your story before someone else does appeared alongside warnings about burning bridges you might need later. Nobody named names, but the parallels were obvious. What unsettled fans most was the feeling that this wasn't chaotic. It felt calculated. Calculated doesn't mean malicious, but it does mean deliberate. And deliberate moves change how people interpret intent. The conversation stopped being about the documentary's quality. Nobody was talking about production value or storytelling style anymore. The debate was about permission. Who had it? Who didn't? And whether permission even mattered at this level of power. By the end of this phase, the outrage had matured. It wasn't loud screaming anymore. It was focused concern. The kind that lingers. The kind that doesn't disappear. After a trending cycle. Because people realize something uncomfortable. Once this documentary drops, the narrative doesn't belong to debate anymore. It belongs to record. When the noise softened, the implications didn't. They sank in. This is the phase where scandals stop being loud and start being permanent. The BMF documentary announcement didn't just stir debate for a few days and fade out. It recalibrated how people viewed everyone involved. And that recalibration didn't come with a reset button. The first shift was subtle but undeniable. Fans stopped asking what the documentary would show and started asking what it would decide. Because documentaries don't just tell stories, they crown versions of truth. Once a version is stamped with production budgets, marketing campaigns, and streaming platforms, it stops being opinion and starts being reference. And that's where the unease lived. Big Meech's name stayed central, but his presence felt abstract. Supporters argued that no one should have their life story finalized without their full alignment. Critics countered that public legacy doesn't belong to one person forever once it becomes cultural property. That argument didn't settle. It hardened. And hardened debates don't dissolve. They resurface when the final product drops. 50 Cent's reputation evolved in real time. To his supporters, this move confirmed exactly who he's always been: ruthless with strategy, allergic to hesitation, and uninterested in waiting for approval. To his critics, it reinforced the idea that he prioritizes control over consensus. Neither side changed their mind. Both walked away more convinced than before. Southwest T found himself in the most complicated position of all. His involvement became symbolic. To some, it represented family continuity and legitimacy. To others, it symbolized a fracture that no press release could smooth over. When family members appear aligned in different directions publicly, fans assume the private conversations already failed. Rick Ross' shadow never left the conversation. Even without constant commentary, his name functioned like a reminder that this wasn't just a documentary drop. It was a moment layered with rivalry, history, and unresolved tension. People speculated whether future responses would come through music, interviews, or silence. In hip-hop, silence can be louder than diss tracks. The most significant consequence wasn't outrage, it was expectation. Audiences began preparing to scrutinize every frame of the documentary before it even existed. They planned to watch with suspicion, not curiosity. That shift alone changed the stakes. Once viewers expect bias, they look for it everywhere. Industry insiders spoke in riddles, as usual. Posts about owning your narrative before someone else does circulated alongside warnings about legacy moves that cost more than they pay. Nobody needed names. The message was clear. Moves like this don't just make money. They redraw lines. The cultural conversation widened beyond BMF entirely. Fans started talking about who owns stories in hip-hop. At what point does a lived experience become shared mythology? And who gets final say when money, platforms, and timing collide? Those questions didn't come with answers, but they lingered like smoke. What made this fallout particularly potent was the absence of reconciliation. There was no public unity moment. No confirmation that all parties were aligned. No statement easing concerns. That absence allowed speculation to keep writing chapters long after the announcement itself stopped trending. As time passed, excitement for the documentary mixed with apprehension. People didn't plan to skip it. They planned to dissect it, pause it, argue over it, compare it to old interviews and leaked stories. This wasn't going to be passive consumption. It was going to be forensic viewing. The danger in that kind of attention is that it leaves no room for nuance. Every omission becomes intentional. Every emphasis becomes suspicious. Every creative choice becomes political. And once an audience watches with that mindset, the narrative is never just the narrative. It's a battleground. 50 Cent didn't walk anything back. He didn't clarify. He didn't reassure. That silence wasn't accidental. It communicated confidence, whether people liked it or not. Confidence reads as power to supporters and arrogance to critics. Both interpretations feed engagement. The reality is this: once the documentary drops, the debate won't end. It will restart at a higher volume. Because then people won't be arguing hypotheticals. They'll be arguing receipts. What was included? What wasn't? Who spoke? Who didn't? And that's where the real fallout lives. Not in the announcement, but in the reaction to the finished product. That's when alliances shift, opinions harden, and reputations feel the weight of permanent record. This wasn't just a media rollout. It was a declaration that the story is moving forward, with or without unanimous approval. And declarations like that always come with a cost. Whether that cost is loyalty, trust, or future collaboration remains unanswered. But one thing is certain: Once a legacy enters the documentary stage, it no longer belongs to whispers and rumors. It belongs to history. If you're still here, don't pretend this didn't shake something loose. This wasn't just another hip-hop headline. This was a legacy moment unfolding in real time. So go ahead and smash that like button like it owes you money. Because the algorithm loves controversy almost as much as the culture loves a power move. Now I want you in the comments. Immediately. Is this a smart business play? Or did 50 Cent just cross a line that can't be uncrossed? Did Big Meech get sidelined in his own story? Or is this simply how history gets preserved when money, media, and timing collide? Don't give safe answers. Pick a side. Say it with your chest. This comment section is the real roundtable, and that's where the real narratives form. And if you're watching without subscribing, that's wild behavior. Hit that subscribe button like you just realized the industry's been playing chess while everyone else argued checkers. Because stories like this don't end with one announcement. They evolve, they escalate. And once the documentary actually drops, the fallout is going to hit harder than the rollout. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Because this isn't finished. Somebody's going to respond. Somebody's going to feel slighted. And somebody's going to say too much at the wrong time. When that happens, you already know where the breakdown is coming first. This channel doesn't recycle press releases or protect comfortable narratives. We decode power plays, connect the dots, and expose how legacy gets shaped behind the scenes with sarcasm, context, and zero fear of backlash. Welcome to Fame Blueprint, where history isn't just told, it's dissected. Dissected.